The last bus was 43 minutes late, and Emmett Crowley was starting to wonder if the universe had finally decided to test every ounce of patience a single father could possess. Snow fell in thick, lazy flakes that clung to his jacket like nature's confetti, each one melting into the growing dampness that made his work boots squelch against the cracked pavement. The bus stop bench was occupied by someone else, a figure hunched forward, military duffel bag at her feet, green jacket bearing patches he couldn't quite read in the dim streetlight. Agnes Perlina sat with her shoulders squared despite exhaustion. That ran bone deep, the kind that comes not from physical labor, but from carrying invisible weight. Her hands were steady, calloused from training, but her eyes held something fragile as she stared at the empty road stretching into darkness. When their eyes met, something shifted. Not recognition, but the instant understanding that passes between people who know what it means to stand guard when everyone else sleeps. "Bus isn't coming tonight," she said quietly, voice carrying the slight rasp of someone who'd learned to speak commands but hadn't forgotten how to be gentle. Emmett checked his phone again. No service. The digital board at the stop flickered once and went dark. Behind them, the city hummed with the restless energy of people heading home to warm dinners and soft couches. But here, at the edge of everything, two strangers sat in the cold, each carrying burdens the other couldn't see. His daughter Hazel was waiting at home, probably asleep by now with her homework spread across the kitchen table and the television. Murmuring some cartoon she'd fallen asleep watching. At 8 years old, she'd learned to be self-sufficient in ways that broke his heart daily. Agnes shifted, the subtle movement of someone calculating distances, exits, possibilities. Her bag was packed with precision, everything folded and secured like she might need to move at a moment's notice. "I've got a couch," Emmett found himself saying, the words emerging before his practical mind could veto them. "It's not much, but it's warm. And there's coffee that doesn't taste like motor oil." She looked at him, really looked, studying his face the way soldiers study terrain, searching for danger, for deception, for the small tells that separate safety from threat. The snow continued falling, each flake catching the streetlight like tiny stars refusing to be extinguished. "Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, your city, your late-night kitchen, wherever you are right now. And when this story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Something tells us you're going to want to see where this goes, because what happened next would change both their lives in ways neither could have imagined." Agnes Perlina had been trained to read people the way cartographers read maps. Every line, every shadow, every detail that might reveal hidden danger. But sitting across from Emmett Crowley in his small kitchen at 11:47 p.m., her usual radar found only kindness and the particular exhaustion that comes from raising a child alone. The apartment smelled like cinnamon toast and the faint medicinal scent of children's vitamins. Hazel's artwork covered the refrigerator in a riot of crayon colors, stick figures holding hands under rainbow skies, a dog that looked more like a purple cloud, and a drawing labeled "Me and Daddy at the Zoo" in uneven letters. "She's asleep," Emmett said, handing Agnes a mug that was chipped at the handle but held coffee that actually tasted like coffee. "School night. Though she'll probably wake up when she hears voices and come investigate. Fair warning." Agnes wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic, feeling the heat seep through her palms. When was the last time someone had offered her something without expecting anything in return? 6 months overseas had left her hypervigilant, always watching for the angle, the hidden cost. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "Neither did you when you told me the bus wasn't coming." He settled into the chair across from her, hands cradling his own mug. "Could have let me stand there all night." Through the thin walls, they could hear the muffled sounds of life. A television somewhere, footsteps in the hallway above, the distant hum of the city that never truly sleeps. But here, in this pocket of warmth, everything felt suspended. "What brings you home?" he asked, then immediately shook his head. "Sorry, none of my business." "Leave," she said simply. 2 weeks before I ship back out." The weight of those words settled between them. 14 days. Agnes had counted every hour since stepping off the transport, but somehow speaking it aloud made the time feel both infinite and impossibly brief. Emmett studied her face, noting the way she held herself, alert, even in rest, like a spring coiled tight. "Family nearby?" Agnes laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not the kind that keeps the porch light on. Before he could respond, a small voice called from the hallway. "Daddy? Who's talking?" Hazel appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes with one hand while clutching a stuffed elephant with the other. Her hair stuck up in impossibly defiant cowlicks, and she wore pajamas covered in planets and rocket ships. "This is Agnes," Emmett said gently. She needed a warm place to wait until morning. Hazel studied Agnes with the unflinching directness of children, taking in the military jacket, the careful posture, the way Agnes held her coffee like it might be taken away. "Are you a soldier?" Hazel asked. "I am. Do you fight bad guys?" Agnes felt her throat tighten. "Sometimes I try to keep people safe." Hazel nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense. Then she shuffled over and held out her stuffed elephant. "Mister, Peanuts helps when I can't sleep. He's really good at keeping nightmares away." The gesture was so unexpected, so pure, that Agnes felt something crack open inside her chest. She accepted the worn toy, noting how loved it was, fur rubbed smooth from countless nights of comfort, one ear slightly chewed. "Thank you," she managed. Emmett watched the exchange with wonder, seeing his daughter's instinctive kindness work its particular magic on someone who looked like she'd forgotten how to accept it. But what none of them knew was that Agnes carried more than just military training and travel-worn clothes. Hidden in her duffel bag was a letter that would change everything. A letter she hadn't yet found the courage to open. Morning arrived gray and reluctant, filtering through Emmett's kitchen window like weak tea. Agnes had spent the night on a couch that was older than Hazel, but infinitely more comfortable than her barracks bunk. She'd slept in fragments, old habits keeping her alert even in safety. The apartment came alive gradually. Hazel's feet hitting the floor above. She'd climbed up to the loft bed sometime after midnight, followed by the rustle of cereal boxes and the soft murmur of Emmett's voice explaining why they had a house guest. Agnes found them in the kitchen. Hazel perched on a step stool helping pour orange juice while wearing yesterday's pajamas and tomorrow's confidence. Emmett moved around them both with practiced efficiency, packing lunch, finding homework, smoothing cowlicks that refused to stay smoothed. "Agnes," Hazel beamed. "Daddy made extra pancakes. They're shaped like dinosaurs, but some of them look more like clouds with teeth." The normalcy of it hit Agnes unexpectedly. This easy morning rhythm, the unconscious choreography of two people who'd learned to take care of each other. When had she last been part of something this ordinary? "I should probably head out," Agnes said, though she made no move toward her bag. "Bus doesn't run until 8:47, Emmett replied, checking his watch. "And Hazel was hoping you'd walk with us to school." Apparently, having a real soldier as an escort elevates her social status significantly. Hazel nodded seriously. "Tommy Brennan's dad is a firefighter, and Sarah's mom is a veterinarian, but nobody has a soldier friend." "Friend." The word landed softly, unexpectedly. They walked through morning air that held the promise of spring beneath winter's stubborn grip. Hazel chattered between them, her small hand occasionally reaching for Agnes's, unconsciously seeking connection. Other parents smiled and nodded, assuming Agnes was a relative visiting, a sister perhaps, or a cousin on leave at the school gate. Hazel hugged her father with the fierce intensity of someone who understood that goodbyes always carried weight. Then she surprised Agnes by hugging her too, small arms wrapping around military-issue fabric with complete trust. "Will you be here when I get home?" Hazel asked. Agnes felt Emmett's eyes on her, careful not to pressure, but hoping nonetheless. My leave doesn't last long." "That's not what I asked," Hazel said with 8-year-old logic that cut straight to the heart of things. After Hazel disappeared through the school doors, Agnes and Emmett walked in comfortable silence. The city was waking up around them, coffee shops opening, commuters hurrying past, the ordinary miracle of another day beginning. "She likes you," Emmett said eventually. "She likes everyone. It's her superpower." "No," he said quietly. "She's careful about who she trusts. Has to be. It's just been us for so long that—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Agnes understood. Single parents became fortresses by necessity, protecting their children from disappointment, from temporary people who might leave if they'd reached the bus stop again, the same bench where they'd met 12 hours earlier. In daylight, it looked smaller, more ordinary. But Agnes felt different standing there, As if something fundamental had shifted while she wasn't paying attention, her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Agnes? It's your sister Virginia. I know it's been years, but I saw you were stateside. We need to talk. It's about Mom. Agnes stared at the screen, her carefully constructed walls suddenly feeling less solid. Emmett noticed the change immediately. Everything okay? She wanted to say yes, to maintain the careful distance she perfected over years of service. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. My mother died 3 months ago. I didn't know. The words hung in the morning air like a challenge, daring the universe to add more weight to shoulders already carrying enough. But sometimes the people we meet in the spaces between where we've been and where we're going become exactly what we need. Exactly when we need them. And sometimes a letter hidden in a duffel bag holds answers to questions we didn't know we were asking. The coffee shop was the kind of place that survived on regulars and refused to update its mismatched furniture from. 1987. Agnes sat across from Virginia Hope, her half-sister, studying features that were familiar yet strange. Same stubborn chin, same way of holding coffee cups with both hands, but different eyes. Careful eyes. Virginia was everything Agnes wasn't. Soft sweater, wedding ring catching the light, the settled look of someone who'd chosen roots over wandering. They'd shared a mother, but not a childhood, geography and circumstance keeping them strangers who happened to share DNA. She talked about you, Virginia said, stirring her latte with unnecessary precision. Especially at the end. Asked me to find you, to give you this. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive paper that felt substantial between Agnes's fingers. Her name was written in their mother's careful script, the same handwriting that had appeared on birthday cards Agnes had stopped expecting years ago. When did she? November. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast. Virginia's voice carried the particular exhaustion of someone who'd watched death approach and done everything possible to slow its arrival. Agnes turned the envelope over, noting the slight tremor in the handwriting, the way her mother had pressed. Hard with the pen, as if willing the words to carry more weight. She left the house to both of us, Virginia continued. Equal shares. But there's a condition. Of course there was. Their mother had never done anything simply, every gesture layered. With expectation and unspoken requirements. The will states that we have to spend 2 weeks there together. Both of us. Before we can decide what to do with it. Virginia leaned forward. I know you're on leave. I know this is probably the last thing you want to deal with, but she's manipulating us from the grave, Agnes said, not without admiration. Even dead, she's trying to force a relationship that neither of us asked for. Virginia's laugh was surprised and genuine. She always said you were the practical one. Agnes thought about Emmett's kitchen, about Hazel's easy trust, about the way it had felt to be part of something normal for 12 hours. Her leave was supposed to be rest, recovery, a brief pause before returning to a world where every decision carried life or death weight. Where's the house? About 40 minutes from here. Well, you'll see. An hour later, Agnes stood in front of a Victorian house that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed more was always better. Gingerbread trim, wraparound, porch, windows that seemed to watch the street with benevolent curiosity. It was exactly the kind of house Agnes had dreamed of as a child, moving from base to base, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. Jesus, she breathed. She bought it after you enlisted, Virginia said, unlocking the front door. Said she wanted to give you something permanent to come back to. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and old books. Every room was perfectly maintained, as if their mother had been expecting company. Photo albums lined the shelves, and Agnes realized with a start that half the pictures were of her. Military ceremonies, newspaper clippings about her unit, even a few candid shots that someone must have sent without her knowledge. On the mantel sat a framed photo of Agnes in dress uniform, standing next to a picture of Virginia at her wedding. 2 daughters, equally loved, equally claimed. Agnes felt something break open inside her chest, a door she'd kept locked for so long she'd forgotten. It existed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emmett. Hazel wants to know if you're coming back for dinner. She's making her famous spaghetti, which is just regular spaghetti with extra cheese. No pressure, but there's a place at the table if you want it. Agnes stared at the message, then at the house that represented every relationship she'd walked away from. every bridge she'd burned in service of independence. Her leave suddenly felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. But first, she needed to read her mother's letter, and she wasn't sure she was brave enough to do it alone. The letter sat unopened on the kitchen counter for 3 days, taunting Agnes with its potential to rearrange everything she thought she knew about her life, as she'd been staying in the house with Virginia, an arrangement that was equal parts awkward and oddly comforting. They moved around each other like careful dancers, sharing coffee in the morning and takeout dinners while learning the rhythms of sisterhood they'd never had the chance to develop. Virginia worked remotely, her laptop humming from the dining room table, while Agnes found herself gravitating toward the garden, overgrown but salvageable, like most broken things worth fixing. "You don't have to read it," Virginia said on the third evening, finding Agnes standing at the kitchen window, watching snow begin to fall again. "I know, but you're going to." Agnes nodded. She was a soldier. She'd never backed down from a mission, no matter how impossible it seemed. Her phone rang. Emmett's name on the screen. "Hey," she answered, surprised by how much relief flooded through her at the sound of his voice. "Agnes. Thank God. I've been calling for 2 days. Are you okay?" She'd forgotten. In the strange, suspended reality of the house and the letter and learning to be someone's sister, she'd forgotten about the life she'd stepped away from, the people who might worry. "I'm sorry. I should have called. Something came up with family." Family. The surprise in his voice was understandable. She'd given him the impression that family was something that happened to other people. "It's complicated." A pause. Then Hazel's voice in the background. "Is that Agnes? Can I talk to her?" "Hazel wants to say hi," Emmett said. "Agnes." Hazel's voice exploded through the phone with the force of pure joy. "Daddy said you might not come back before you have to go away again. But I made you something, and Tommy Brennan said soldiers collect important things from the places they visit. So this is your important thing from here, okay?" Agnes felt her throat close. "Okay. It's a friendship bracelet, but I made it with the good string, not the cheap kind that breaks when you wash your hands. And I put a little bell on it, so you can hear it when you move and remember that I'm thinking about you." The simple generosity of it, the assumption that of course Agnes would want a reminder, of course she'd want to carry a piece of them with her, undid something that had been holding tight for months. "That sounds perfect," Agnes managed after. Hanging up, she stood in the kitchen while Virginia pretended not to watch her from the doorway. "They sound nice," Virginia said eventually. "They are. So what are you afraid of?" The question hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. Agnes picked up the letter, feeling its weight. "I'm afraid," she said slowly, "that reading this will make me want things I can't have. That it'll make me soft when I need to be strong. That it'll make leaving harder than it already is." Virginia stepped closer. "Maybe leaving doesn't have to be the only option." Agnes looked at her sister. This woman who'd chosen stability over adventure, roots over wings, and wondered if they were more alike than she'd realized. "I've never stayed anywhere long enough to find out what happens next," Agnes admitted. "So maybe it's time to find out." Agnes opened the letter. The paper was thin, delicate, and covered in their mother's careful script. But as Agnes read, she realized this wasn't just a letter. It was a love story. The story of a woman who'd spent 20 years regretting the distance she'd allowed to grow between herself and her daughter, who'd bought a house and filled it with photos and hope, waiting for the day when Agnes might be ready to come home. The final paragraph was brief but devastating. "I know you think love is something that holds you back, keeps you from being who you're meant to be. But what if it's the opposite? What if love is what gives you something worth fighting for, worth coming home to? There's enough room in this house for all the life you haven't lived yet. And there are people in this world who need what you have to give, not as a soldier, but as yourself." Agnes set the letter down with shaking hands. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the garden in pristine white, making everything clean and possible again. But inside, Agnes felt something break open that had been locked away for so long. She'd forgotten it existed, the wild, terrifying possibility of staying. Agnes found Emmett at the elementary school pickup line, leaning against his truck while other parents clustered in familiar groups. He spotted her before she reached him, and the smile that spread across his face was worth every uncertain step she'd taken to get there. "You came back," he said simply. "I had to collect something important," she replied, echoing Hazel's words. "When?" Hazel burst through the school doors and saw Agnes waiting. Her shriek of joy caused several heads to turn. She launched herself into Agnes's arms with the complete trust of someone who'd never doubted this moment would come. "You're here. I told everyone you'd come back. Tommy Brennan said soldiers don't keep promises to kids, but I said you weren't just any soldier. You were our soldier. Our soldier." The possessive pronoun wrapped around Agnes like arms she didn't know she'd been missing. That evening, the three of them sat around Emmett's kitchen table while Hazel carefully tied the friendship bracelet around Agnes's wrist. The little bell chimed softly with each movement, a gentle reminder of connection. "It's perfect," Agnes said, meaning it. Hazel beamed. "Now tell me about your family. Daddy said you found some relatives you didn't know about." Agnes glanced at Emmett, who nodded encouragingly. "I have a sister, and my mother left me a house. A whole house." Hazel's eyes went wide. "Is it bigger than this one?" "Much bigger. Big enough for a family." Something passed between Agnes and Emmett, unspoken but understood. The possibility of what if hung in the air like the scent of something baking, warm and promising. "Can we see it?" Hazel asked. The next day found all three of them standing in front of the Victorian house. Virginia had returned to her own life, giving Agnes space to figure out what came next, but not before extracting a promise that they'd stay in touch. Hazel's reaction to the house was everything Agnes could have hoped for. She ran from room to room, declaring each space perfect for different imaginary purposes. This would be the library. This would be the art room. This would be where they'd have tea parties with Mr. Peanuts. Emmett moved through the rooms more slowly, taking in the careful preservation of a life Agnes had thought she'd left behind. "She really loved you," he said, studying a photo of Agnes at her graduation from basic training. "I'm starting to understand that." They ended up in the garden, Hazel chasing what might have been the last butterfly of the season while Agnes and Emmett sat on the back steps. "My leave ends in 5 days," Agnes said. "I know. I could request a transfer. There's a base about an hour from here. It wouldn't be overseas deployment, but it would be different." Emmett was quiet for a long moment, watching Hazel spin in circles until she collapsed, laughing, into a pile of leaves. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Agnes looked at this man who'd offered shelter to a stranger, who'd shared his daughters. Easy love, who'd made space at his table without asking for anything in return. She thought about the house behind them, full of promise and possibility. She thought about the letter in her pocket, about her mother's belief that love didn't trap you, it set you free. "I want to stay," she said, the words feeling like a prayer. "And a promise. I want to find out what happens when I stop running toward the next mission and start building something that lasts." Emmett reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers like they'd been designed to fit together. "Well," he said, his voice warm with barely contained hope. "Hazel's been asking if you could teach her to make a proper military bed. Apparently, my hospital corners don't meet her standards." Agnes laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I think I can handle that." From across the garden, Hazel called out, "Are you guys done talking about mushy stuff? Because I found a really good stick and I need you both to see it right now." They looked at each other and burst into laughter, the kind that comes from relief and joy and the sudden understanding that sometimes the best battles are the ones we stop fighting. The phone call came at 0600 hours on what was supposed to be Agnes's last day of leave. "Sergeant Perlina." The voice was crisp, official, the kind that meant somebody with more stars than her had made a decision. "This is Colonel Hayes. I understand you've submitted a request for stateside transfer and assignment change." Agnes sat up in bed, her childhood bed in her mother's house, where she'd been staying while Virginia helped her navigate the legal paperwork of inheritance. Through the window, she could see Emmett's truck in the driveway. He'd stayed over, sleeping on the couch after they'd spent the evening making plans that felt both impossible and inevitable. "Yes, sir. Your request has been expedited and approved. Effective immediately, you're assigned to Fort Meridian as a training instructor. You'll be working with new recruits, teaching survival and tactical assessment." Agnes felt her heart skip. Fort Meridian was 37 minutes from the house, 43 minutes from Emmett's apartment, close enough to build a life that included both service and everything she discovered she wanted. "Sir, may I ask why this was expedited?" A pause. "Your commanding officer submitted a recommendation along with your transfer request." He noted that excellent soldiers aren't just defined by their willingness to deploy, but by their ability to train the next generation. He believes you have something valuable to offer young soldiers who are about to face what you've already survived. After the call ended, Agnes sat in the quiet morning light, holding the phone like a talisman. Below, she could hear Emmett making coffee, the soft murmur of his voice as he talked to someone. Probably Hazel, who'd convinced him to let her skip school today for what she declared Agnes's official staying day. Agnes found them in the kitchen, Hazel sitting at the counter wearing her pajamas and a serious expression while Emmett attempted to braid her unruly hair. "It looks like a bird's nest," Hazel was saying. "Agnes would do it better." "Agnes has had military training in precision and patience," Emmett replied. "I have had training in doing the best I can with what I've got. Which is why you need Agnes to stay forever," Hazel said with 8-year-old logic that cut straight to the truth. Agnes cleared her throat. They both looked up, and she realized that whatever she said next would determine the shape of all their tomorrows. "I just got word on my transfer request," she said to Emmett's hand stilled in Hazel's hair. The little girl held her breath, as if the wrong movement might tip the universe toward disappointment. And Agnes smiled, feeling the weight of years of careful distance finally lifting from her shoulders. "Looks like you're stuck with my hospital corners." Hazel's shriek of joy could probably be heard 3 blocks away. She launched herself from the stool and into Agnes's arms, nearly knocking them both over. "You're staying. For real staying. Not just visiting staying. For real staying," Agnes confirmed, catching Emmett's eyes over Hazel's head. The look that passed between them was worth every risk, every leap of faith, every moment of uncertainty that had led them here. "So," Emmett said, his voice carefully casual, "I guess this means we should probably figure out the logistics. Your house, my apartment, Hazel's school district." "Actually," Agnes said, setting Hazel down but keeping one hand on her shoulder, "I was thinking this house is pretty big for one person. Might be nice to have it filled with the kind of family my mother always imagined living here." Hazel looked between them, her expression cycling through confusion, understanding, and then pure delight. "Are you asking us to move in with you?" Emmett asked. "I'm asking if you want to build something together. All 3 of us." Hazel threw her arms around both of them, creating a circle of connection that felt unbreakable. "Is this what forever feels like?" she asked, her voice muffled against their sweaters. Agnes looked around the kitchen, at the morning light streaming through windows her mother had chosen, at the man who'd offered shelter to a stranger, at the child who'd given her friendship. With the generosity of someone who'd never learned to hold back love. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think this is exactly what forever feels like." Outside, snow began to fall again, but inside, everything was warm and possible, and home. 6 months later, Agnes stood at the front window of what Hazel had started calling our house, watching Emmett teach a group of neighborhood kids how to properly throw a football. His technique was questionable, but his enthusiasm was infectious, and the sound of laughter carried through the glass like music. The house had come alive in ways Agnes was still learning to appreciate. Hazel's artwork now covered the refrigerator. In layers, each new creation added without removing the old ones until the appliance looked like it was wearing a rainbow coat. Emmett's books mingled with her mother's on the shelves, and his coffee maker had found a permanent home next to her grandmother's china. In the garden, the vegetables they'd planted together were beginning to show green shoots, proof that some things grow better when they're tended by more than one pair of hands. That Agnes's new assignment at Fort Meridian had turned out to be exactly what she hadn't known she needed. Training young soldiers gave her a sense of purpose that felt different from deployment, but no less important. She was teaching them not just how to survive, but how to carry the weight of service without losing themselves beneath it. "Some of you will serve overseas," she told her most recent class of recruits. "Some of you will find that your greatest battles are fought closer to home. But all of you will discover that being strong doesn't mean standing alone. It means knowing when to accept the help that's offered and when to offer help in return." The advice felt personal because it was. Every day, Agnes learned something new about the intricate choreography of building a life with other people. She'd learned that Emmett hummed when he cooked, that Hazel talked to Mr. Peanuts when she was working through problems, that families were created not just by blood or marriage, but by the daily choice to show up for each other. Virginia visited regularly, bringing her own children to play with Hazel and marveling at how the house had transformed from a museum of careful preservation into a home full of active, joyful chaos. Mom would have loved this, she'd said just last week, watching Emmett fix a wobbly table leg, while Hazel supervised with the seriousness of a general reviewing troops. I think she knew, Agnes had replied, touching the friendship bracelet that still circled her wrist, its tiny bell chiming softly with each movement. Now, watching her chosen family through the window, Agnes felt the particular contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. Her phone buzzed with a text from one of her former soldiers, now deployed overseas. Your advice about finding something worth coming home to saved my life today. Thank you. Agnes smiled, typing back. That's what we do for each other. Stay safe. Emmett appeared in the doorway, grass stains on his jeans, and a grin that still had the power to rearrange her entire day. Hazel wants to know if you'll come outside and show everyone how to do a proper military crawl. Apparently, their technique needs work. Their technique. Okay, my technique needs work. She's been very diplomatic about it. Agnes laughed, following him toward the door. As they reached it, Hazel came barreling up the front steps, cheeks pink from cold and exercise. Agnes, Mr. Peterson from next door wants to know if you can teach his son Marcus how to tie knots. I told him you're really good at making things stronger. Is that what I do? Hazel nodded seriously. You make everything stronger. Our family, the soldiers you teach, even the tomato plants. Everything gets better when you show up. Agnes knelt down to Hazel's level, straightening the girl's jacket with hands that had learned tenderness alongside strength. You know what, kiddo? I think that works both ways. As they headed outside together, Agnes caught sight of their reflection in the hallway mirror. Three people who'd found each other in the spaces between where they'd been and where they were going. They looked like what they were. A family built on choice and chance and the courage to believe that some risks are worth taking. The afternoon light stretched long across the front yard, turning ordinary moments into something that looked suspiciously like happiness. So now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Your living room? Your break room? Somewhere in between destinations? Drop a comment and let me know. Rate this story from 0 to 10 because your voice matters to me. If this reminded you that home isn't a place, but a choice we make every day, hit that subscribe button so you'll never miss another story about the unexpected ways love finds us. And remember, sometimes the best journeys begin when we stop running towards something and start building something worth staying for. Until next time, keep your hearts open to strangers with kind eyes. You never know when they might become family.